Welcome to the deep dive. If you've been following global events, you've probably got that feeling, right? That kind of unsettling sense that, wow, things are really heating up everywhere.
Yeah, it definitely feels like more than just isolated incidents. It's like several intense situations flaring up almost, simultaneously.
Exactly. So today, we're going to try and cut through that noise a bit. We're doing a focused exploration, looking at the most pressing global hotspots right now, and we're drawing directly from the stack of sources you've shared with us.
Mm-hmm. And our mission here, really, is to give you a clear, almost like an on-the-ground understanding of these complex events.
Right.
We want to help you grasp the severity, understand the interconnected risks, and sort of pinpoint what's really at stake. Hopefully, provide those aha moments that connect the dots for you.
Absolutely. Think of it as your way to get clear, actionable insights into what feels like an increasingly turbulent world,
Mm.
without getting totally bogged down. And to do that, well, the sources seem pretty clear. We need to head straight into what they're calling the epicenter of a new firestorm, the Middle East.
Indeed. The material points to a really specific critical date, June 22nd, 2025.
Just days ago.
Right. And on this day, the U.S. and Israel reportedly carried out a coordinated bombing campaign. The targets, Iran's key nuclear facilities.
Which one specifically?
The sources named Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. These are, central to Iran's nuclear program enrichment and heavy water production.
But these aren't minor targets.
No, not at all. The descriptions say they're deep, hardened, some even underground. Hitting them, well, it signifies a major, major escalation. Clearly something that wasn't decided lightly.
And Iran's reaction, the sources say it was fast.
Almost instantaneous. We're talking about in hours. Firing missiles and drones directly at Israeli cities and U.S. bases in the region.
Both. Simultaneously.
Both simultaneously, which is a huge step. And there's this quote reportedly from Iran's top general. That's just chilling. War starts now.
Wow, okay. So that direct hit on both Israeli and U.S. targets, that's a massive shift, right? Moving beyond the usual proxy stuff.
Absolutely. It feels like a calculated move by Iran to, redraw the lines, saying, okay, the old rules are out. Plus, the sources mentioned ballistic missiles put on alert, U.S. forces in the Gulf on high alert. It's tense.
Extremely. So the big question is, why now? What pushed things over the edge on June 22nd? Was it something specific?
It seems like a culmination of factors based on the material. Iran's accelerated nuclear program is definitely highlighted as a key driver.
Right. That's been a concern for a while.
Exactly. And combined with that, its ongoing support for groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis down in Yemen.
Both major Iranian proxies.
Yes, extending Iran's reach. So from Israel's viewpoint, this combination, the nuclear progress and the proxy network, well, it's seen as an existential threat.
And
The stated U.S. aim was pretty clear: stopping Iran from going nuclear. But, as our sources point out, launching this kind of strike against those kinds of hardened targets, it's just no small decision. Immense strategic weight behind it.
you can imagine the global reaction must have been intense.
Oh, absolutely. Immediate fallout. The sources mention Gulf countries like the UAE and Qatar begging for calm, clearly terrified of regional instability spilling over.
And the bigger players?
Russia and China were reportedly quick to blast the U.S., accusing them of making things worse. Predictable, perhaps, but adds to the tension.
And the economy, oil prices.
Jumped significantly right away. And there's this huge underlying risk, right? If Iran actually tries to block the Strait of Hormuz, the impact on the global economy could be catastrophic.
It really feels like the whole region is on a knife edge.
Completely. And the sources really stress the potential for unintended consequences here. It's not just about direct military clashes, that cyber warfare, shipping disruptions, non-state actors getting bolder, it could spiral really fast.
So everyone's just watching, waiting for Iran's next move. Could this be the start of that, wider Middle East war people have feared?
It feels dangerously close.
Yeah.
The potential for rapid escalation, drawing in others, Lebanon, Syria, the Gulf states, it's very real. This is a critical moment.
Okay, so an incredibly tense picture in the Middle East. But like you said at the start, it's not the only hotspot. Let's shift to Eastern Europe. The war in Ukraine, still raging.
Still raging, yeah. Over 2 years now, and the sources, well, they don't offer much hope for an end anytime soon.
What's the current situation on the ground, according to the reports?
Russia's apparently launched a new offensive focused around Kharkiv and Sumy, that's in the northeast, trying to gain more ground.
But Ukraine's pushing back.
Fiercely. using drones, missiles, quite effectively, it seems. Even hitting targets inside Russia, Belgorod, Kursk, places like that.
Okay, so still a very active, bloody conflict, but the sources mentioned something else, something shocking.
Yeah, this was definitely a standout point in the material. Unconfirmed reports need to stress that. Unconfirmed, but reports of North Korean troops potentially helping Russia near the border.
North Korean troops in Ukraine, if that's true. What does that even mean?
Well, if it is confirmed, it's a massive shift. A real game changer, you know. It takes the conflict beyond just Russia and Ukraine.
It makes it truly international.
Exactly. It signals Russia digging deeper into its alliances, looking for any help it can get. And it puts huge pressure back on the West, on NATO, to figure out their next steps.
And the human cost just continues to mount, I assume?
Staggering on both sides. The reports mention heavy Russian losses, planes, tanks, but also Ukraine struggling with manpower. That's a recurring theme.
And Western support.
Still flowing, still crucial, but the sources suggest it's maybe slower than Ukraine needs or hopes for. And meanwhile, civilians, particularly in cities like Kharkiv, are getting shelled almost daily. It's just a brutal, grinding reality.
So why no end in sight?
Fundamentally, neither side seems willing to back down. Russia wants more territory, maybe even push further west. Ukraine is absolutely determined to get every inch of its land back.
A total stalemate, then.
Pretty much. Until something significant shifts either militarily or politically, the sources suggest this fight just grinds on.
Okay, from that long, grinding war, let's pivot south now. South Asia, another flashpoint, apparently heating up again. India and Pakistan.
Yes, another really worrying development highlighted in the sources. They point to a specific event back in May 2025.
What happened?
Following a deadly terrorist attack on Indian soil, the sources don't detail it further, but attribute it to militants based in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. India launched what they called Operation Sindoor,
Which was?
essentially an airstrike campaign targeting militant camps in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. A direct strike across the line of control.
And Pakistan's response.
Swift and alarming. Drones, missiles, mortars fired back across the border. The sources use this phrase, the border lit up like fireworks. Both sides immediately started blaming each other, claiming self-defense.
And the really scary part here is...
These are two nuclear-armed nations, with a history of wars between them. Any clash, even seemingly small, carries this immense risk of escalation. Miscalculation could be, well, catastrophic.
Have things calmed down since May?
A bit, yes. The sources say things cooled slightly in June, but tensions are still described as sky-high.
How so?
Well, the media on both sides is reportedly hyping things up, lots of nationalistic rhetoric, and troops are still mobilized along the border. It wouldn't take much another attack, even a border skirmish, to potentially reignite things very quickly.
And there's a political angle, too.
Yeah, a really concerning one. Apparently, there are upcoming elections in both countries. And the worry, highlighted in the material, is that politicians might use nationalism, might stir up the conflict, to rally support.
Playing with fire, given the stakes?
Exactly. That political risk, combined with the nuclear dimension, makes it incredibly dangerous. It just shows how domestic politics can spill over and threaten international stability in a huge way.
Okay, so Middle East, Eastern Europe, South Asia, incredibly volatile. But there's another crisis the sources flag, one that maybe doesn't get as much attention, Sudan.
Right. Often called the forgotten war.
Right.
But the sources are clear. It's one of the absolute worst humanitarian disasters happening anywhere in the world right now.
What's the core conflict?
It's a civil war, primarily between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary group known as the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces.
Yeah.
And the fighting has just devastated the country, left it in ruins.
And the human cost?
It's almost unimaginable. The report mentioned North Darfur facing outright starvation, and overall more than 25 million people inside Sudan needing urgent humanitarian aid. 25 million.
That's staggering. And it's not just collateral damage, is it? The sources mention something darker.
Yeah, what's truly abhorrent, according to the material, is how both sides are apparently using hunger as a deliberate weapon of war. Actively blocking aid convoys, preventing food and medicine from reaching desperate populations, laying siege to cities. It's described as a calculated strategy to inflict suffering.
That's horrifying. Is anyone stepping in? Any major powers trying to stop it?
That's the other tragedy highlighted. a disturbing lack of concerted intervention. It seems like the world's attention is elsewhere, perhaps overwhelmed by these other crises.
So people are just...
Dying silently, that's the phrase used. Dying silently as the situation gets worse and worse, largely out of the global spotlight.
Okay, so we've looked at these 4 major hotspots: the Middle East, Ukraine, India, Pakistan, Sudan. Taking a step back, what does this all mean together? What's the bigger picture our sources paint?
The key takeaway is that these aren't isolated incidents. The sources frame it as a kind of multi-front crisis. Everything feels interconnected.
How so? Let's recap.
Okay, Middle East, teetering on the edge of a full-blown regional war involving Iran, the U.S., Israel, potentially pulling in Lebanon, Syria, the Gulf. A massive escalation.
Right. Then Ukraine.
Ukraine is fighting for its very survival. Russia's doubling down, maybe even pulling in outside help like North Korea, which just adds layers of complexity and risk.
In India, Pakistan.
A hugely volatile flashpoint. Nuclear-armed neighbors, tensions sky high, could erupt again at any moment.
And finally, Sudan, representing broader African conflict zones.
Bleeding profusely, facing famine while the world seems largely indifferent. A massive humanitarian catastrophe unfolding almost unseen.
So what are the broader global consequences of all this happening at once?
Well, the material outlines several. The UN appears overwhelmed, unable to cope effectively. Global powers are deeply divided, pulling in different directions.
Which probably doesn't help de-escalation efforts.
Not at all. And ironically, or perhaps predictably, weapons sales are booming. The world seems to be arming up, preparing for more conflict, not less.
And the economy.
Unstable oil markets are a direct consequence, especially with the Middle East tensions. And the ultimate cost, repeated across all these zones, is borne by millions of innocent civilians caught in the crossfire.
It's a grim picture. So let's bring it back to you, our listener. As we wrap up, what are the key things to watch for? What are those critical points to keep an eye on?
Okay, first, definitely watch Iran's next move in the Middle East. If they retaliate hard, like hitting U.S. bases directly again, or major Israeli cities, what happens next? Could that be the trigger for the full-scale regional war? That's critical.
Second point.
Keep a close eye on the Ukraine front line. Are they starting to lose significant ground? And crucially, is there confirmation of those reports about North Korean or other external troops helping Russia? That could really change the game and potentially draw NATO in deeper.
Third.
Think about the implications if India and Pakistan do clash again, seriously this time. What would that mean for the stability of all of South Asia, beyond just Kashmir? The economic and human consequences could be devastating regionally, even globally.
And lastly, Sudan.
Yes. Will the world continue to look away? Watch for signs of the famine worsening. The sources warn it could become one of the deadliest humanitarian crises in decades if nothing changes. The scale of silent suffering there is hard to comprehend.
Understanding these dynamics, these interconnections, it really is crucial, isn't it, for just grasping where things might be heading globally.
Absolutely. It's a complex and, frankly, dangerous moment in time. But staying informed, understanding these pressure points, that's the vital first step for everyone trying to navigate it.